What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch back here with another NFL record prediction. In this video, I'm going to break down the Detroit Lions 2020 NFL schedule, let you know what their record will be in 2020. Will the Lions finally be able to get themselves back to the playoffs under Matt Patricia, or will it be another season full of struggle? I'm going to answer that question here, but before I answer that question and give you the Lions 2020 record, make sure that you do Gronk spike the like button, subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more NFL videos just like this, and comment below your opinion. Let me know, do you think the Lions are going to shock everyone and be a good team in 2020, or are you staying with the pack? You don't think they're going to be so good? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, let's break down their schedule. Starting off week number 1, they play at home versus the Bears. This is a pretty good opener for the Lions. You know, being that it's at home, being that it's probably versus the team in the Bears that is the least talented in the division when you compare them to Green Bay, Minnesota. They really have a question mark at the quarterback position. Is it Trubisky? Is it Foles? You know what? I actually am tending to lean towards, I think it's going to be Trubisky. And if it is, I think that's going to be a major mistake for the Bears organization to make. And I think they're going to make that mistake. I think the Lions are going to win this game. But regardless, if it's Foles or if it's Trubisky, I think the Lions can win this game. Because I think Matt Stafford and the Lions can throw the football versus the Bears. I think, you know, the Bears are really good up front. They're really good at stopping the run. And they have some pass rushers, but I think they can throw the ball versus this team. And really, Chicago doesn't have any weapons on their side of the ball that scare you. They were terrible at running the football last year, which shouldn't be a problem for Detroit in this matchup. So I like the Lions to win this game at home in week 1. They play Green Bay in week 2. And this is perhaps probably my biggest hot take for the Lions this year, even more so than that I think they're actually going to be pretty good, which is a spoiler. But I think they're going to beat the Packers both times they play them. And I'm going to give you some reasoning. They actually have played the Packers just about as good as any opponent has played the Packers and Aaron Rodgers over the past 3 years. I believe they have a winning record versus them, and they're 4-2 in the last 6 games. And the last 2 games, the last game of the year last year, they lost by, I want to say, 1 or 2 points, maybe 3 points, and they should have won that game. I think Rodgers made a miraculous comeback to win, and that was without Matt Stafford. The first game we know had the Trey Flowers ridiculous calls that ended up costing them the game, and they should have won that game as well. So really, the 2 games that they lost, they should have won. And then the other games, they pretty much dominated. So yes, Matt LaFleur is 2-0 versus Matt Patricia, but the games that they won, one was without their quarterback, and the other, you know, was a little questionable. So I actually think they're going to beat the Packers both times. And I think it's better that the Packers play the Lions play the Packers in Lambeau early in the year as opposed to later in the year when it might get a little snowy and all that kind of stuff. And the weather might be too much to handle. But I think that's positive that they play them on the road in week 2. And I think they can win this game in week 2. Now, week 3, you play the Cardinals. And if you remember this last year, this game, another game, the Lions, classic Lions, their history. They should have won this game as well. Okay, this game was a draw, or tie, you know, in overtime, I believe. And some wacky things happened at the end of the game. I think the Lions will win this game, although I'm not positive they'll win this game. I think the Cardinals are a tough matchup for the Lions. I think Kyler Murray's ability to move is something that is difficult to handle for a team like the Lions, and just traditionally the Patriots system of defense has trouble with mobile quarterbacks. But I will say that I think Matt Stafford should be able to score, and the Lions should be able to move the ball on the Cardinals defense. So this game will probably be a shootout. It's again in Arizona, so it will probably be pretty similar to the game last year, honestly. I think the Lions win this game, though, because I think they'll learn from the matchup last year. I think they have gotten a little bit more athletic on defense, and I think they're deeper in the secondary. And even if Kyler Murray is improved from last year to this year, and of course that was week 1, I think the Lions overall are improved as well. So I think the Lions are going to win that game. Week 4, they play the Saints. I think the Saints will win this game. I think this game won't be a blowout, though. I think the Saints are obviously challenging for a number of reasons, and number one is Sean Payton and Drew Brees and what they can do offensively. But Detroit, I think they can give them some issues if they're able to play in-your-face man coverage, and they can make this one interesting with Matt Stafford throwing versus secondary that I think is kind of overrated and a little underwhelming to me. I think that's the weakness of the Saints overall. So this game could be a shootout and actually one that the Lions could pull off an upset here. If they indeed lose to the Cardinals, I wouldn't be shocked if they came back and beat the Saints. But I just think the Saints are overall the better team, and they can beat you in a number of different ways, whether it's passing, running. Defensively, they have a very strong defensive line that I think is a little underrated. So I'm going to go with the Saints there. So they go in their bye week 3-1, looking like a pretty solid team. And of course, I have them beating the Packers, so 4-1 right now. Then week 6, they play Jacksonville. This is kind of a weird game, and Detroit's coming off a bye week. I think they're the Lions, right? You guys, they're the Lions. They're going to lose one or two weird games on the schedule. And for some reason, I think one of them is going to be Jacksonville. Okay, Jacksonville, I don't know how warm it's going to be in Jacksonville at this time of year, but they're coming off of bye weeks. I think the bye week is a little overrated right now in the modern NFL. I think it actually hurts some teams more than it helps some teams because of the rust factor. And maybe it helps them, maybe it hurts them. We'll have to see. And I haven't really dove into what's Matt Patricia's record after bye. I don't think it's good, but we'll have to see. I just think Jacksonville is one of those teams that Minshew can get on fire and he can just have a great game. And I do think Jacksonville is going to win like 2 to 4 games. They're not going to be very good, but they're going to pull off a couple upsets, and they're kind of like that sleeper team. And they're the perfect team that you don't want to play coming after a bye because they're that sleeper team that you're like, okay, this is Jacksonville. We're 3-1. We're looking good this year. And then you play Jacksonville and you're like, how did we lose that game? And it's just going to be one of those type of games. Week 7, they play Atlanta in Atlanta. I think they also lose that game. So they'll be 3-3. This is just a game where I think Atlanta is very fast on defense. They have a pretty underrated D-line that can get after Stafford. And offensively, they have Julio and they have some playmakers. And this will probably be another game that between both Matts, very high scoring game, but probably pretty entertaining. I have Atlanta just squeaking it out. Week 8, they play. I will say, though, about Atlanta, Patricia's defense played pretty well versus, Kyle Shanahan's this is a long time ago, but 2016 in the Super Bowl in that second half. So maybe Patricia has some things that he can pull from that game plan. Week 8, they play the Colts in Detroit. This is a game that's interesting. I think they could lose this game, but I think they could also win this game. I think it depends here if Detroit is able to run the football and stop the run in this game versus the Colts. Because the Colts are a team that if they're able to dictate the pace of play and they're able to really dominate you with their rushing attack, and then they can probably beat the Lions. But if the Lions are able to slow down the rushing attack of the Colts and not get overwhelmed in that area, and then Stafford can attack this secondary, which I feel they're very basic defensively. They play a lot of cover 2. They're not very overwhelming in terms of their defense. They're just kind of pretty basic, as I said, and their scheme isn't very vast or different. They're not going to throw a lot of different things at you. I think Detroit can win this game. I think this is one that I could easily go back and forth. I think these two games here, this 3-game stretch, when you look at Jacksonville, Atlanta, Detroit, if they can find a way to win 2 games out of the 3 here, they're looking really good. So maybe they do beat Jacksonville and Atlanta, but they lose to the Colts, or maybe they lose to Atlanta and Indy and beat Jacksonville. Either way, I think they're okay if they go 1-2 or 2-1, preferably 2-1, but we'll see. Week 9, they play the Vikings in Minnesota. I'm going to say that Minnesota beats them in Week 9. Minnesota's played Detroit really well, especially last year, and they've found a way to really score on Detroit and move the ball on Detroit. I will say, though, they have a different OC this year, so maybe that changes some things, and I don't think they don't have Stephon Diggs anymore, which will hurt them for their downfield passing attack, but defensively, they're still very solid, and unlike the Colts, Zimmer has a more complex defense, which I do think gives the Lions a little bit more issues. Week 10, they play Washington at home. I think they'll win that game. Week 11, they play Carolina on the road. This is another sneaky, like Jacksonville-esque type of game where you don't want to sleep on Carolina because they have some weapons offensively that they could move the ball, but their defense is pretty bad. And I think when I just determine it comes down to, can Carolina's secondary stop the Lions' passing attack? And I just think that answer is no. Week 12, they play the Texans. Same thing here. I think, the Texans, I would say, are similar to Green Bay, I think. They have a really good quarterback, and they have some weapons. Like, the Packers don't really have the weapons, but they have Adams. Houston has a lot more weapons in terms of the amount of weapons they have with Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller and Kenny Stills. But that's going to be a challenge for Detroit. This game's on Thanksgiving. Detroit knows Thanksgiving well. They play it on it every year. Houston, their defense is very underwhelming on paper to me. They really have J.J. Watt and not a lot else. Their pass rush is very reliant on J.J. Watt, and who knows if he'll even be playing in this game in Week 12 because he gets hurt a lot. Their secondary is very bad. I think this is a game Detroit can win, again, because I think if Stafford is healthy and playing and the receivers they have and the weapons they have in the passing attack, if you don't have a good secondary versus Detroit, you're not going to fare very well because I think a lot of people are sleeping on what this passing attack can do. I mean, just go back and watch them early in the season. They were moving the ball on basically everybody. Week 13, they play Chicago in Chicago. This is a game I think they lose. I think they split with Chicago. I think Chicago's difficulty to play in Chicago late in the year. And I do think Nick Foles will be playing at this point in the schedule, so that will make it a little bit more tough. Week 15, they play Tennessee. I think they lose to Tennessee. Tennessee and Mike Vrabel's been very good versus, Patriot, Bill Belichick tree coaches. They beat the Patriots in the playoffs last year. I think they understand how to attack the defense, and I think they understand what these teams like to do offensively, which Detroit doesn't play a similar offensive system to New England. But I think when you look at Tennessee, they're one of the teams that could really run the ball on Detroit, I could see, with Derrick Henry. And then defensively, they're very smart. They're very versatile. And I think that comes in handy when you play the Lions. Then they play the Bucs in Week 16. This is a game that I wouldn't be shocked if they actually somehow pulled an upset. But I think the Bucs, they'll be very hot. They'll be better at the end of the year because I think Brady on his new team is going to have to get used to the receivers and the offense and the whole team and the atmosphere. And I think by this point, Tampa Bay is going to be a well-oiled machine offensively. So I'm going to go with the Bucs. Week 17, they play Minnesota, and I think this game will determine their playoff lives. If they win this game, they're in. If they lose this game, they're out, and I think they'll beat them. So, ultimately, 9-7, they're 3-5 away, 6-2 at home. I have them beating Green Bay twice, but really when you look at this schedule, even if you don't have the wins and losses the way I do, okay, let's just take a look at this schedule, right? I think this is a really nice schedule Detroit has. Because when you look at their toughest games, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and if you want to include really outside of the division, it's New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and I would say the third hardest team they play is maybe Houston. You can maybe argue Arizona, but that's a steep decline. Tampa Bay and New Orleans to me are two of the elite teams in the NFC. Once you get past that point, they don't really play any other elite teams. I think Minnesota and Green Bay are pretty good, but not great. And they know them well enough where they should at least split with them. So let's say they lose to Green Bay once, right? They lose to Green Bay once. There is definitely a chance they could beat beat Atlanta. There's definitely a chance they could beat Atlanta and still be 9-7. There's a chance they could lose to Atlanta and beat Jacksonville, and they're still 9-7, right? There's a chance that they beat Chicago both times, right? There's a chance that they lose to Houston on Thanksgiving, but they beat Tennessee. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could go. I think really when you look at it, the toughest games are New Orleans and Tampa, but they're luckily at home. All the toughest games for Detroit are at home, really. So I think that's very favorable, and I think this is honestly a team that basically everybody is sleeping on. So when I look at it, putting back their record here, if I can do it properly, I think they'll go 9-7 because they'll probably lose a game that they don't expect to lose, but they'll probably win 1 or 2 games that they don't expect to win. So I think Detroit, if Matt Stafford is healthy, is a better team than people think, and I think they will. If they don't win the NFC North, they will be the number 2 team in the NFC North. And right now, as it stands today, I have them winning the NFC North because I don't think it's going to take much more than 9-7. I think you can win this division at 9-7 or 10-6. I think Minnesota and Green Bay, they'll go somewhere around the same range, 8-8 to 10-6. And I think Detroit's right there, and I think Chicago is in last. And that's the way I look at it right now for Detroit at 9-7. All right, guys, let me know in the comment section what you think. Do you agree with me and think, Detroit is actually better than people think? Or do you think that they are a team that is going to disappoint again? Or do you think they're a team, a lot of other people are just writing them off? Are you one of those people? Let me know in the comment section below. It's Mitch with The Bottom Line View. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.